So what is BOSS really? It's meant to be a way for developers to get access to our search data in our infrastructure, so that you can actually pass in a query to get back results in XML or JSON, and then build an experience on top of that. So you can take that data, mix it into other content, blend it, re-rank it, do whatever you want to do with it pretty much, and then build your experience. We also give you sponsored search ads, which are probably the most relevant advertising online. It's based on a query, so it's based on what the user is looking for, and so you can show very relevant advertising. And in our case, it's a commercial API, so the idea is that you can take this service. We actually charge for the data, but in return, if you're putting up sponsored search ads on it, you're getting a revenue share from the ads. So the idea is that you can actually build a business from the business, service. And in fact, we have tens of thousands of developers, and a lot of them run their businesses on top of this service. One of a good example of that is a company called DuckDuckGo. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're a search engine. They use a BOSS for a lot of things on the back end, and they're a VC-funded company that's kind of doing things in the search space. We've similarly a lot of companies that have used this data, use sponsored search ads to kind of build this experience completely. And we do a lot of support and tools as well. So we have a lot of code samples. We have a very active Yahoo group for BOSS. We have a ton of folks answering questions and so on. So it's very engaging group. And that kind of gives us the motivation to kind of constantly do some interesting things with the product. And so we start off with search, and we offer obviously web search and news search and image search and a whole bunch of backends. But in addition, late last year we also started giving our geo services as well. So what does that really mean? So you can, as I mentioned, you get all these different backends. You can pass in queries. You can pass in things like site restricts. So you can say, give me back only results for specific sites. Give me back results only for where you can remove certain things. So kind of going through this really quickly here. So let me get back to this in a second. So things like you can do, you can pass a specific query to different backends together. So if you want to say web, image, and news search, give me back everything that's associated with the bottom. Give me back those results. Versus if you want to give different backends, different search queries, and come back and bring them all together. So one of the interesting things I've noticed people do online is take, for example, a web search, and then they want to figure out all the images that are associated with the specific image search results, with those specific results that you're getting back. And so you can find images associated with those same websites, bring it back, and kind of build a whole experience that's got image and regular web search content together. So here's like a simple movie search, for example. You're passing in a query .NET, you're restricting it to specific sites. So you're getting back only movies content here, only associated with .NET, so they can kind of build an experience on top of that. You can also do and/or queries, and these get really complex. I've seen folks that start to play around with this a lot. So you can do Steve Jobs and only an iPad or an iPhone. I don't want both, for example. Or I don't want any other mentions in there other than the iPad or the iPhone. So you can do only and/or queries, and you can specifically site restrict it to Best Buy and UA as well in this particular case. You can site restrict to up to about 10 sites easily together and get back results, and then reland them based on what you think is relevant. You can also use unary operators. So you can do Batman and give me back all the Batman results, but without dark being mentioned in there. So you're removing all the dark night results. Here you're asking for Heath Ledger, but not Dark Knight, where the site is movies.yahoo.com specifically. So for example, in this particular case, if you're trying to build an experience about Heath Ledger, where you don't want any Batman, his Batman stuff to be mentioned, you could go get a whole bunch of content associated with him. You could use this in addition to other APIs to figure out, for example, the whole experience around that. Right? So this is what the output looks like. Again, I'd say take a look at the docs. The docs have a lot of different examples. They have a lot of different details on each of the backends, and they look very different for each of the backends. And so you can do a whole bunch of different things. Does anybody have any questions about BOSS before I kind of get into the demo? So hopefully everybody's got like a high-level view of like what the service offers. One of the things that I mentioned very briefly, but we also offer geo services through the API. So the idea is that when we offer two services, and I'll kind of introduce them really quickly. We have a service called Place Finder, which is you give it, it's a geocoding and a reverse geocoding API. So you give it an address, it'll give you back a lat long. And then in addition, if you give it a lat long, it'll give you back an address. So that's an interesting API. It's fairly standard in the kind of the geo community. What's more interesting, especially in a hack concept, is Place Spotter. So Place Spotter is you give it some textual content, an article, or just a piece of a sentence. And if there's any locations that are mentioned in it, it'll pull back those locations and it'll tell you those are locations. It'll recognize them and it'll tell you information about those locations. So it'll say it's a neighborhood, or it's a city, or it's a state. And then you can combine them with something called GeoPlanner, which is also a YDN API. And GeoPlanner gives you hierarchical information. So if you say Hammersmith, it'll say Hammersmith's a suburb of the city of London, which is part of Great Britain. Kind of give you that kind of hierarchical information. And you can also do siblings, so you can say, what are all the other neighborhoods that are around Hammersmith, things like that. So you can do interesting kind of combinations of information there. So those are our geo services. So now that I've introduced those two services, let me talk about the demo itself that I put together here. And this is a hack that I wrote. I spent probably 24 hours on it. But at a high level picture, what I was trying to do was trying to build, and by the way, I'm like the worst front-end programmer in the history of the world. I don't do a lot of front-end programming, so forgive me if it doesn't look really pretty. But the high level here was that I was essentially trying to do location prediction based on IP and show you relevant content associated with that based on that IP. So if it's an IP that's coming in from London and the query is football, I would show you soccer-related information. But if the same query came from a US IP, I'd show you about our American football. And so that's what the intent of the service, the hack is. So let me show you what the response looks like really quickly. So again, I'm showing you on the browser, but here specifically at Place Finder, I can just pass an IP address, and I can essentially detect that specific location. So you can say here, this IP is in Sunnyvale, and similarly, this IP is in London. And I pull this based on the IPs from this particular location here. Right? So these are the first two things. And the second thing that's very interesting is with our new search, you can specifically pass in a query term, but then you can also pass in a location associated with that query term. So it'll give you back only new search results that are specifically were generated in that specific location. So if an article is written in London, only then will it show up.
Can you use like geo points for that location? So could you, for example, use your current location with your GPS sensor?
You can't give it a lat long, but you can give it like city names, pretty much so. Or you can also, no, you can't give it like a zip code or anything like that, but pretty much a city name, yeah. And then, I ask for XML results here. You can ask for any set of up to 50 results per query. Specifically, I asked for 25 here, and I filtered it only for the UK market. We have pretty much coverage across the world here, so you can ask for specifically articles written in specific, about football only from Fiji, for example, and get back only results associated with that. So those were kind of the high level, and this is what the output looks like, right? So here I'm showing you football's first lady on Luis Suarez. I heard about this. This is supposedly the biggest news in football here in the UK. And so these are some of the articles that are on football today. So this is what the hack is about. So trying to figure out the IPs, based on the IP, I'm going to plug in the location and serve up the results. One thing I want to quickly mention is that Sunnyvale is not the most popular place for writing articles, and so I kind of did not filter for the US. I just said, give me back all US results in the case of the US search. In the UK, I actually specifically asked for London. Okay. So in terms of code, as I said, we have keys available, and so we'll be putting up that on community site, and so you can use those. And so here, I created, at a high level, 2 elements. I created a news element, and this news element is based on the response that you got back. So here I'm capturing the abstract, the click URL, the title, language, date, all this information that's coming out here, right? And this is PHP code, by the way. And then similarly, I have a location element that's capturing some of the elements that I think are useful for me from a location perspective. So here, all I did here is I said, as you get these specific elements, the name matches. Let's pull those into my array that I have here. Okay. So this is really the meat of the code here, the XML via OAuth. You could get JSON as well. First thing I'm doing is I'm actually preparing the URL. So I'm providing it all the parameters that I want. So in the case of news search, I'm asking for the market, I'm asking for the number of results, things like that. In the case of the place finder call, I just had to pass the IP in. So really this is what this is doing. I can walk you through that method here. So just adding to the base URL the place finder versus news search, for example. And then depending on the back end, so news search is getting in a bunch of different parameters. And as I said, the country code is, if it's empty, then I use, if it's not empty, then I use Great Britain. If it's not, then I use the US. And similarly in the geo, I just pass in the query and the format. So I got all this together. Then I create an OAuth consumer. I create an OAuth request. Based on that, I sign the request. And then I create a URL based on that. So I plug in all the OAuth parameters and I initiate the request. Once I just initiate that, I just use the PHP kernel library to execute that and go back to response. We also have support for persistent HTTP, so you can keep that connection open and kind of make that call over and over again. The other thing that you can do with this is you can use the YQL table instead as well to make this much simpler if you want to, and call that as well. And then you can do things like essentially do infinite scroll, where you're combining this with Node.js and making that call to potentially in this particular case, I could start by filtering only to London and then expand it to the rest of the UK. And so that would be an infinite scroll kind of news articles where I could be starting to get initially articles from London. As I kind of end up, all the articles from there, I can end up with more content, which is expanding the scope of the location. Or I can also bring in related content, for example, which is related to football. So you can start to build like this infinite scroll of just news articles that could be potentially personalized based on the location, but also an additional elements that you can potentially discover based on that user's information that they're giving you. As I said, I'm creating the URL, and then I start once I get back the response, I'm just parsing that the data. So I'm figuring out, I'm flattening out the XML, and then I just pull out all these different data elements, so the abstract, the click URL, the title, things like that. So this is pretty much my standard read XML code. This is, again, nothing fancy here. I'm just taking the array and getting it together. We'll skip this part. I was trying to type the IP, but that wasn't working too well. But after that, I'm just taking that and displaying the algo results that I got from this content. Let me show you how this actually ends up looking. So here's, I try to render this for mobile better. So here I'm like passing in specifically an IP that was the US IP, and I'm getting back a bunch of results that are, this is about concussions, football camps, and a whole bunch of additional information. This is US general. There's the draft going on, which is very popular in the US, and it's happening right now. It's just news content. Again, I could see this being like an infinite scroll, where you're kind of getting this content as people kind of scroll down the page, getting more and more content that's either more results or kind of based on location or personalization. One of the things that we've been doing at Yahoo is playing around with personalization a lot, and so how you can kind of bring that element in would be very interesting in this particular context. So now I can take a London IP against the same thing. So here it's talking about Karen Brady's football dairy, football booze, and a whole bunch of other stuff specific to the UK. So yeah, all these articles written in London, specifically as well. Right? Obviously, I could change the query, for example. Let's talk about the tube. This is all the articles today about the tube. Supposedly something got shut down, and there's drivers who validated it, a whole bunch of other stuff. Any questions?
Do you order? Is it ordered?
Yeah, so I just ordered it based on relevance, but you could also re-rank it based on date, or you could choose to re-rank it based on whatever you see. For example, if you want to re-rank it based on Sarah Harding, sounds like one of the articles is based on Sarah Harding. You could potentially try to find that phrase in the abstract and pull those articles further up, and push other stuff down. Things like that where you could do as well.
Is it possible to order on distance from that location?
Distance from that location? I know where you're going with that. So I think that's what he was asking as well. You can do, this location that you can give is only at a city level. The problem is that the news articles don't have like lat longs associated with them. So there's no way to like essentially say, hey, it's specifically written here. So the best way to do that would be figure out a city that you want to start with, and then using GeoPlanet, figure out all the cities that are kind of related to it, and then start exploring kind of beyond it using GeoPlanet. That's the way I would do it.
But you said you can get the location based on content, so you can just give it the article and get back the location essentially. So we have a lot of.
Sorry, can you say that again?
One of the APIs is to give an article
Yes.
and get back the locations.
Yes.
So you
You
can
could
also see it.
Yes, you could do that. Yes, so you could essentially pass it to PlaySpotter, get back any locations that were mentioned in the article, and then figure out which ones of those match to the location that you're looking for. As well.
And if you had a Parisian IP address, the article would presumably be in French.
Pardon me?
If you would it come in French if you were in France?
Yes. I mean, I only coded it for the US and UK, but I can add other markets. Yeah. Again, this is just an example that I put together, but I could see this going in different directions based on like your own ideas. I'd be curious to know, is there other things that you would want the API to do in the context of search, in the context of location?
That long.
That long based on articles? Yeah.
If you're using YQL, it'd be nice to get the IP of the request from a request, or optionally have. So, yeah, the YQL uses the IP from the request and puts it in.
Automatically?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah. The problem is like IP detection is hit or miss. So in fact, like I tried this out, when I initially started doing it, I wanted it to be completely automated, where it kind of detects my IP and then figures it out. So anywhere I go, I type in a query, it'll give me relevant articles based on where I am. But it didn't work out that way because it was, it seems like there's an internal IP here, which is what my machine seems to be passing. And, yeah, so I had problems with it, so that's why I kind of plug in these things.
And will we be able to do stuff with adverts this weekend? Will we be able to do stuff with adverts this weekend?
With adverts?
Yeah.
I asked about this. Do you want to? Is that okay? Okay. Meet me afterwards, and we'll try to figure out a way for you to do that.
It'd be nice if I could do like range, so you could search range of Sheffield or UK cities north of Sheffield.
Okay. One thing you could do potentially is you could get back a list of all the cities in the UK. So the GeoPlanet YQL table, for example, gives you back lat longs associated with all the cities. So the city's table somewhere. So these are the tables that give you like things like belongs to. Hammersmith belongs to London, or these are just, you can do descendants. So Hammersmith's a part of that. Neighbors, so related things around it, things like that. But one of the things that you could do is,
Does this have a mobile API?
pardon me?
Is there a mobile API?
These are all white-whale APIs, so you can call this using Node or anything else that you want to you could use. If you're using iOS, there's a Objective-C version of OAuth as well, so kind of call the APIs.
Where would we be able to use polygons to define areas?
You want to find, sorry.
Can we create like a polygon and kind of, instead of having a single reference, have an actual polygon within which you want to search?
So you want polygon search, basically. Okay.
Because like, if you do like...
There isn't like a nice way to do that. I would think, again, you'd want to explore the idea of,
like for instance, if you get like, your neighbors, and if you think about a localized service, and you allow people to define their community, and say, here's 3 streets or like a town borough that I'm living in, and you can create a polygon around that, so you can capture that area geographically and then relate all the stuff to that polygon.
yeah. No, I don't know if this thinks of in the ideas of like neighborhoods and cities. It's essentially geo names. It's not intended to be at a much more granular level than that. But I could see it being that way. But I would also I don't know how the data here in the UK is, but Yelp has a pretty good API that way, so you can give it like a lat long and give back like location elements in that context.
Is the boss index the Yahoo index, or is it the Bing index?
So we get web and image search from Bing, but everything else is served from Yahoo. So we crawl and index, for example, news content, blog content, things like that. And then all our geo APIs are our services.
Sorry, a heretic question. With the new kind of range orientation of my business point, is this kind of service that will come out for the next couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so Boss itself is like very popular. Like we have tens of thousands of developers out there who are using the service, including like several large like Fortune 500 kind of companies. And so, in fact, every time we've talked about this with Marissa, and I've talked to her about it, and it's been she's super excited about what we're doing there. And so, yeah, we're gonna be doing more, if anything. Cool. Thanks, guys, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Or I'll be here all weekend long. So.